Hey, yo, my Platycoaster friends, Johnny 5 Alive here, and welcome back to our Project Red Promise Let's Build. So in the last video, we started to build the foundation for our Mars base slash restaurant, which again is all building towards a contest example. And this is all based off of Overwatch, a character Juno, as well as elements from the Overwatch series. So today, what I have in store for you guys is footage from 3 different builds. We're building a drop pod, we're building a rover, and we're also building the Overwatch sort of like deployment ship, the main Overwatch ship, which they use to deploy the Overwatch heroes on various missions around the world. So they're all based off of real existing Overwatch assets, some sort of inspiration or, reference point. We're copying with taste. We're trying to build them as accurately as possible with a Planet Coaster spin, because obviously the shapes, the angles, and way things are constructed, we don't have the luxury of doing things polygon by polygon. We have to use in-game assets combined together to create the forms, the shapes, the silhouettes, and the details of said existing assets. So we're starting things off with the drop pod, which actually is the foundation for everything. And what I mean by that is when Chant and I were coming up with some ideas for this contest and getting what we're building here, Overwatch, it's not, just to be clear, just if you guys have been guessing what the contest is going to be, it's not an Overwatch contest. Don't start building Overwatch stuff. That is not what we're going for here. However, I have chosen to do Overwatch as my example, as my kind of inspiration, or what inspires me. I wanted to create something from a game that is close to my heart, that I enjoy playing, that Chant and I enjoy playing together, and I wanted to use elements from that to create something, right? So that is part of the contest in terms of like where your inspiration comes from. It doesn't need to be Overwatch per se, right? But what we're doing here is showing how we can use elements from our favorite game and incorporate that into our contest example or our project. So why is the space shuttle the foundation of everything? Because Juno is a new character to Overwatch, and generally speaking, when a new character comes out, there's usually a map that goes with that character, right? Based off that character's origin story and location from where they came from around the world. We don't get that for Juno. But what we did notice is that if you go to Watchpoint Gibraltar in the Overwatch, it's one of the maps, and it's the home base to the Overwatch heroes, and it's actually where you spawn when you are the attackers. You'll spawn in Watchpoint Gibraltar. In there, you can, while you're waiting to spawn, you can look at all the little Easter eggs of, how the Overwatch assembled their missions and all sorts of different things like that. And what has been recently updated or added into said Watchpoint is this little escape pod that had a logo on it that said Project Red Promise. We pieced the two things together and we figured out, hey, this belongs to Juno. Red Promise has gotta mean Mars, and that's technically what it turned out to be. So here I am, like, that's my only thing related to my character other than my character is a little drop pod. That's all I have to work with in terms of, I don't have a Mars base, I don't have a Mars map, but what I do have is Winston's lunar colony map, and we can use that as a sort of inspiration for sci-fi space stuff, things that came from the moon, which translates very well over to Mars, I would imagine. So that a lot of my pictures and reference pictures that I got in my inspiration came from the moon base. And we kind of combined the one element that I did have, which was Project Red Promise drop pod, and we combined that, I combined that with moon stuff. So obviously I want that main feature incorporated into my build. So we built the logo there just now. We whipped that together really quickly. It's pretty accurate to the logo from the game. And what I'll do at the end when I actually show the whole presentation off, and we show all these things in game so you can get a better look at it that's not at 10 times speed or whatever, I'll bring up the images of what I'm trying to build and why. Or I would have done it at the very beginning of the video. I'm not sure. I'll do a little bit of both. We're figuring this out. We're presenting things in a different way than we normally do. It's not really a spotlight, it's a let's build. And I haven't really quite figured out how I want to present these things just yet. So that's the spaceship's basically done, and we're jumping straight over to the rover now. While we'll get a better look at the actual, drop pod in game at the end of the footage here. Let me see here. It's a 26 minutes of footage, which at 10 times speed would have been a lot more, 260 minutes or something, right? So yeah, we're speeding it all up and then doing all three of them. But they were built at different points in different stages, so you might see some spoilers in the background, especially when we're building the spaceship. Maybe, I'm not entirely sure. Fingers crossed I don't spoil too much here. But I took the footage from the future, from the midpoint to the all sorts of different aspects of the different stages that I was building things at, and just kind of lumped them together to be thematically correct. So rather than my build jumping from part 1 to part 2 and just being all over the place and kind of chaotic and random like the way I approached building things what actually was, I decided I would break things up into videos that made sense. So today, making all three of the videos, making all three of the vehicles, while I didn't necessarily make them one after another, or we're seeing them one after another here today because it makes sense as a video in terms of format. This little piece here is a bugger, the chopper vent. It changes color every time you reload the map based off of whatever color you last had selected or something, or it's just random. It's kind of annoying because in the final presentation, I think it's pink, but ideally I wanted it to be blue or orange to go with the color scheme of my build. But yeah, we have a reference image up for the lunar rover. And this one particularly, we found it on the moon in the lunar moon base map for Overwatch. So I just said I'm gonna take that rover, try to build it as closely as possible, but plankofied, and yeah, make it somewhat resemble that of the original moon one, but then also repurpose it to be a Mars one. So some of the logos and the designs and the little color schemes that go into it, certain elements of it, are going to be purposed towards that of Mars, not that of the moon. So it should, in theory, between the rocket ship, the rover, and then the spaceship that comes in the end of this video, those are big recognizable assets from Overwatch. From if you're playing the game, you're spawning in the maps, you're playing the maps, participating in the gameplay, you're gonna see these things all the time. So if you are a fan of Overwatch, you do recognize these things if you look around close enough, especially the Overwatch ship. So part of this build is making sure that the overall project comes out feeling like something out of the Overwatch universe. So if you're a fan of Overwatch, you should go, hey, I recognize some of those things. And if you're a fan of sci-fi, you should be like, hey, that looks sci-fi to me. I mean, you don't have to be a fan of it, but you should be it should be recognizably sci-fi as well. And lastly, the overall whole project, you should look at that and go, hey, this is Mars, right? This is a Mars base. So there's something for everyone, and that's kind of what I'm going for. You don't have to be an Overwatch fan to appreciate what I've done. You don't have to be a sci-fi fan to appreciate what I've done. There's something for everybody. We're building something in Planko that's fun in and of itself. We're building something sci-fi. That's pretty fun. And we're also doing something Overwatchy, so that's kind of like the cherry on top. I don't think you necessarily have to be a fan of Overwatch to really appreciate these finer details, these types of things, right? If you were just making a Mars base or something sci-fi, some of these elements would be probably something you would think about or consider making for a project like this. So I think if we just take the context of that, hey, Johnny's making a Mars base, that alone is pretty cool. But if I accomplished making some of these things recognizable from the Overwatch universe, I consider that to be a bonus win on top. So with this little build here, I'm trying to figure out like how to mix basic shapes in with pre-existing pieces. So we built the wheels. We used the in-game wheels, but covered them up with our own, hubcap things to make them feel like rovery, and putting in our own body kit using basic shapes, but then wedging in things like crates and random pieces to help not only add detail, but flesh out shape, right? To create like an interesting silhouette, but then also make it sensible. We want to have doors on there. So aquatic has come, I'd say I used a lot of aquatic pieces for this build overall. By the end of this, the 8,000 pieces, I want to say there's probably more aquatic than there is sci-fi. The sci-fi pack that we got from Planet Coaster 1 is something I'm very familiar with. If you guys remember my Planet Coaster 1 builds, I have pages upon pages upon pages of sci-fi builds that use these pieces. In fact, I think the most downloaded item on the workshop is my Cosmic Cow sci-fi milkshake shop. So I got the award for that way back in the day, for like 2017 or something like that. And it's still going strong with like 100,000 downloads or something crazy. So but yeah, I had a lot of experience building with these sci-fi pieces. So obviously that's one of the reasons I lean towards building the Mars base, Juno, and Overwatch. It's kind of similar to what I've done before. I'm familiar, right? But it's not Cosmic Cow. It's not Planko-fied. We're trying to Overwatchify it, but be a little bit more serious, a little bit more gritty, and, a different tone than that of what we call Plankofication. There's no bubbly Cosmic Cow silliness and UFOs and milkshakes and all that stuff. We're going a little bit more serious, and we're making, rovers and spaceships and all sorts of crazy stuff, hydroponics, and, getting crazy. So some of this stuff I might have been better if I used the mirror, but not everything can be mirrored. If something's mirrored, it's like flipped, and it's not an exact mirror. As I was building this, I thought to myself, should I use the mirror trick? It could have helped with a few of these things, but in some cases it actually just sets you back. So I just copy pasted it, dragged it, rearranged it. So it might not be perfectly symmetrical, but we tried, right? If you're working with everything angle snapped and rotation snapped and that sort of thing, and you're adjusting it, it should be pretty close on both sides. So mirroring doesn't always work in all cases, especially because some of these are the bridging centerpiece, and they're not on both sides. They're poking through both sides. So I think I chose the right approach on just building both sides. But there is an argument to be said that like some things you might want to use the mirror trick. But sometimes that can be more finicky than it's actually helpful, right? You can see the spoiler alert. You can see the actual building. If you look for it, we're sped up. It has made a little bit of progress, I think, maybe. So, but not too much. Yeah, it has like a roof on it and stuff like that now. But we're gonna be doing all that in like the next video or something. So you'll see all that come together, but it's not too far along. I started making progress, and I was trying to figure out like, oh, I have the roof now, but we have to know, and I said this at the end of the last video, knowing what elements you're going to be including is very, very important, because we need to know how big they are, where they're going to fit, what they're going to look like. And if we can't get those things right, or maybe the ship turns out to be way too big or way too small, we have to adjust our building to compensate for that. So I had an idea how big I want my landing pad and how much space I need on the roof to get a ship, but we are limited by how much the pieces scale in this game. So we use the boat there, the big cruise ship, as our window, because that's the best way to get the window. We have to cover that up, but how much can it scale? And we're using these big sci-fi pieces to block out our build. How much can they scale? And I did do a little bit of scaling. You saw me tweak it a little bit, but I figured out like about the rough size of how big I needed things to be. And now we're just going to work off that size, because now when I finish this build and I bring it to the landing pad, I know it will fit. And if it fits, then I don't have to change my roof, and I don't have to change the width of my building. And if the ship needed to be slightly bigger or slightly smaller, then I could go adjust my build accordingly. So I stop everything that I'm doing to go build this spaceship, because it's an integral part of the composition of the overall build, how it's going to look. And if I just can't make a good looking ship, I have to scrap the idea entirely. And my plan B for that was building up like building the building into a cave system. So basically big rocks and stuff would take the place of the ship to help build out the silhouette and composition that I was going for. But I want the ship. And that's the question, is, am I even capable of making a ship? And I don't think I made like a Cosmic Cow UFO, but I was never a fan in Planet Coaster 1. I've seen these pieces are obviously intended for people to make these big motherships and vehicles with, right? They're obviously like aerodynamic, and they look like wings, and they look like hulls, and a lot of them are essentially they're jet turbines and all that sort of stuff. They're essentially intended to be jammed together to make these like monstrous space vehicles. But like, they're kind of clunky, and they have weird LODs. So when I was zooming in and out, I could see them popping and stuff. And I was like, I went into this build thinking, I'm going to try to make this ship with like as few pieces. Like, if I made the Overwatch ship with purely basic shapes, it would be more curvy. It would be, I'd have to round out all the hard edges. It would be a hot mess. It would be a 10, 15 hour project probably. So how can I shortcut my way to making this ship look good with these big sci-fi pieces? How much time will that save me? And will it look okay? And what I've quickly found was I jam that cruise ship in with that big wing piece, and it's like, okay, that's something. And we make those big turbines that turn on the side and on the back. Okay, that's something. But they're not, the in-between is just not looking right. So maybe now I use the basic shapes to kind of smooth the in-between. The problem with that, you have these big sci-fi pieces that have all sorts of intricate details on them. Textures and normal maps that have these lines, panels, and all sorts of different things. So, I knew that this would be a weird hybrid where you're taking smooth, clean, or, I guess organic pieces in terms of how you use them organically, in terms of the smoothness, the angles, the curves, and that, and you're mixing it with these like hard edge, extra detailed sci-fi panels. And as I was building it in my mind, I almost wanted to throw it out and start over, but then I just like kept on going. I was like, I can make this work. Let's just keep adding more to it, and let's just commit and see where we can take this. And we will end up with this weird hybrid of like smooth pieces with very textured sci-fi pieces, and that is a weird combination, admittedly. And I had my doubts in my mind while I was building this, but I needed it's like, if the silhouette is right, that's all that matters. We can add detail later. Can't really remove detail. Those pieces have detail. You could cover it up. You can put basic shapes on top of it to follow the curve and cover up the texture, or you could lean into it And yeah, so I'm seeing how it fits, how's the sizes. It's about what I needed, fits my landing pad. I had pre-measured how big it needed it to be roughly. We don't talk about this. I'm moving stuff over. That's tomorrow's build where we make that character. I mean, you didn't really get a good look at it. Sure, you could pause, but there's a character over there. We're going to build that tomorrow. It's a pretty crazy build. We're talking 1,000-piece basic shape character, hyper detailed. So we're using some of the dog feet, the stupid mech dog thing from the Sci-Fi pack. We're using that as our landing gear, and we're just adding all this stuff to it. So I'm in this weird situation where I'm like, my ship works, the silhouette works. It's what I need it to look like, but it's not quite looking right yet. So we just fixed that with detail. So we're making the Overwatch logo, and we're gonna use these pieces to put the Overwatch logo on the ship. So that'll add a little bit of detail. We have our Red Promise logo. We can use that. Normally there's like there's the Overwatch logo, but then there's that blue one on the top, and that's, I don't know what it's called. It's like Watch Point or something. It's something, some sort of designer logo on the top, but we're just going to replace that with our Red Promise, so that we're basically repurposing the Overwatch ship to look like it's from Mars, right? And yeah, so little design patterns that we can just like almost decal onto our build. And I'm taking that straight out of the reference images of the ship that I was using to kind of like see, well, how am I gonna make this look less plain white, and try to get the details of that plain white to match that of the Sci-Fi panels and pieces that it's built into. So we're using these little rods, poles, I don't know what they're called, to create random lines. And then we take a Project Red Promise logo, put that on top. We follow some lines through. Helps it feel a little bit more aerodynamic, but it also helps create noise in the plain white basic shapes, right? And I want to try to add these as much as possible. However, there's not a lot of ways to add more. Thinking about it now, when in episode 1 we use these the glass panels. The glass panels, there's a ridged version where it has a frame, which you could use that to create circular lines. So I think that could have come in handy here as well if I wanted to add more around some of the circular shapes. So, but I think what we came up with worked. And there are some little bit of hard edges and lines that kind of stand out a little bit that we cover up later with lights. I didn't record that part. When I eventually got to the lighting, the building, I was like, oh yeah, I should probably put some lights on the ship. I forgot about that. So you guys will see it with the lights at the end, the final version, when we're done the speed build here. And I think it turned out pretty good. It nails the, for what we have in Planet Coaster, trying to do something from Overwatch, something as organic and curvy as this ship is, it's pretty tough task. So I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. It's recognizable. But like if you put mine next to the original, you could definitely tell like it's not quite the same. It's just, if you didn't look at if you haven't seen the Overwatch ship in a while, but you knew what it looked like, you would see this and go, oh, that's the Overwatch ship. So I think it's like recognizable enough, and I think that's the most important thing to go for when you're making these types of builds, is to just go for the likeliness, right? Don't sit there and fret over every angle, every crevice, because you're going to end up with 1,000 pieces like I did with my character, which I purposely fretted over because I wanted it to be insanely accurate. But I'd say don't sweat the small stuff, right? And just go for the likeliness and see what you can achieve there. So, yeah. Basically, once I had the silhouette, there's a few key elements that I wanted to kind of copy and get them on there. But then the rest is like kind of make believe. Like the door's supposed to be on the side. We put mine on the back. It looks like it makes sense, like some back hatch thing, right? Some loading door on the back. We don't need a door on the side. We don't need to try to figure out how we're gonna squeeze a door into this mess on the side. It's not necessary. So again, just like getting that likeliness down and then making the rest make sense or make believe for what makes sense to you, right? There is like a fin or a wing on the original ship, but we make ours look a little different. And, you know, the thrusters on the side, we made ours look a little different. As long as they're there and they represent what should be there and they hit the silhouette right, you don't really need to worry about the finer details being exact, but it's still important to add finer details. Just make them up as you go. And that's what I kind of did. I just added my own finer details. And some of this sci-fi junk, it just stands out way too much. So again, what we're doing is we're removing some of that texture and removing some of that clunkiness by putting basic shapes over top of that so that the smoothness of what we've already built flows into some of these more detailed and complicated or intricate pieces. So it's a very fun build at the end of the day. I was actually kind of like excited about how I took the clunky, stupid sci-fi pieces and meshed them with basic shapes. So let's hop in the game and take a look because my footage is out. All right, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Starting with our little spaceship here, I'll bring up a picture on screen of what the original looked like. And there is my version. We got a little door on the back. We got little lights. We got little thrusters and that sort of thing. We did what we could for Planet Coaster using aquatic mixed with sci-fi mixed with basic shapes. And I think we pulled off something that resembles what it should. And we could tell that it's some sort of rocket / drop pod, right? So it's a simple build, but it's fun. Our rover, I'll bring up a picture on screen of what the original looked like here. And yeah, I think we pretty much nailed the silhouette, the likeliness of it. Again, the details are different. The sizes and shapes might be a little bit different, but the likeliness is there. And this isn't supposed to be a one-for-one copy because the one that I took reference from was the Moon rover. So this is the Mars rover. So it's okay to take some creative liberties to make it look a little bit different than the original. And lastly, there's the Overwatch ship. I'll bring up some images of what it looks like on screen here. And it's not exact, but it's plankofied, right? It somewhat resembles the shape, the size, the feel, and likeliness of the Overwatch ship. And then by adding these little things like the Overwatch logo, the Project Red Promise, and that sort of thing, we've repurposed it to be not the Watchpoint Gibraltar Overwatch ship, but the Mars Project Red Promise version of the Overwatch ship. So it's kind of like a cousin ship. It doesn't need to be exact, and we could take our own creative liberties and figure out how we're going to get there. Plus, we got to make a cruise ship mixed with basic shapes, mixed with sci-fi pieces, come together in a way that makes sense, and I think we accomplished that goal. It has this clean, white, jet-like exterior feel to it, and as long as we accomplish that, I'm pretty satisfied overall. So yeah, it turned out to be pretty cool. I like the aesthetic of it, and I feel like it represents Overwatch pretty good. We used little lights and stuff to cover up some of the junky little bits, the weird connection points. But because it's so white, you don't really see some of the harder angles that would normally be exposed and weird, how they didn't connect together quite nicely because we didn't have the right shapes to do that. The white, it kind of just all washes together, and we can kind of stuff in some random details there to deter the eye and you know, take away from the weirdness of it. So I think we hit the likeliness of all three of our creations, and now we have these elements, right? We can find ways to incorporate these into the build. This being somewhere in the front of the build will help fill in some negative space. There's that iconic room that I wanted to build for the lunar moon room where the rover comes in from the moon. I wanted to recreate that scene. Therefore, I needed the rover. So we can kind of do something something very similar there. And then the ship sticking off the top of my build, which will create like an interesting look to the top of the composition. Now we have that element to help bring our build together. We know it works. We know it fits. Now we just need a landing pad and a way to fit it all together. These elements are going to help us build our build, but we're missing one more element, and that is, well, two more elements. That is Juno and our hydroponics. So that's what we're going to do in the next two videos. We're going to get our last two elements in, our character that represents our build, our universe, our everything, and then we're going to move into our hydroponics, and then we're going to put it all together. We're going to take the ship, the pod, the rover, the character, the hydroponics, and we're going to find ways to incorporate them and place them into our build, and then we're going to build the build, and from there we're going to decorate it, and then we're done. So let's go. I'll see you guys in the next video where we build a 1,000-piece basic shape character that is hyper detailed. The hardest thing I've ever done with basic shapes ever is going to be in the next video. So we'll see you guys then. Bye now.